My name is Randall Eggert. This class is Grammar and Stylistics. It's about writing clearly.
All right, so we're going to be talking about tense and aspect in English, which means we're talking about time, which I personally find to be a fascinating subject. I'm really fascinated by the physics of time, not that I understand it, because it's exceedingly complex. But the nice thing about being a linguist is I don't need to deal with the complexities of time because languages treat time in a pretty straightforward fashion. Essentially, it's a timeline that there's a moment of now, the present, and everything that precedes it going indefinitely to the left is in the past, and everything that follows it proceeding indefinitely to the right is the future. And we then have ways of using language to represent places on that timeline. Now, different languages represent that grammatically differently. So some languages use tenses, others languages use aspect, and still other languages have neither, where they've got adverbs or preposition phrases that represent places on the timeline. English uses both tense and aspect. So to start with, I want to have this simple present sentence: she crosses the finish line. Imagine this is a sports announcer announcing a marathon. She crosses the finish line. In that case, that event A happens right at the present moment, right? And that's actually fairly rare that our utterance coincides with an event that happens at a particular instant. It's probably more common for us to have sentences like B, she likes running, where this is a characteristic that extends both into the past and the future. It's understood that her liking running didn't begin at this instant and end at this instant. Rather, she liked running beginning at some point in the past, and she will like running off into the future. But we're not drawing attention to that. We're focusing instead on just that present moment and leaving the rest understood. Simple past means typically that there's a past event. In this case, C, she ran a marathon last Tuesday. That's pretty straightforward. It's just representing, again, a simple place on the line. Likewise, with she will run a marathon next Tuesday. Now, when we start adding in aspect, so in this case, the progressive aspect, then we get something like E, she is running a marathon right now. Now, like B, where it extends into the past and the future, this one is slightly different, though, where E is explicitly telling us that this happened over a span of time. That's what the progressive aspect does. It draws attention to the duration of something. So the difference between tense and aspect is that tense points us to a place on the timeline. Aspect points us to a relation of that time. So in this case, that it happens over a span of time, a duration. And likewise, if we had a past progressive, like she was running a marathon last Tuesday, then we move to perfects. And I'm going to begin with past perfect, with H. So H, she will have, G, she had run a marathon before she turned 20. So in that case, we've got some event, let's call it alpha, because we haven't actually assigned a letter to that, but there's some event alpha where she turned 20. And prior to that, there was an event G where she ran a marathon. Okay, so the perfect relates one event to another in terms of anteriority. That, in other words, this event happened before this event. Likewise, if we say she will have run a marathon before she's 30, then presumably there's some event, let's call that beta, of her turning 30, and we're saying anterior to that, there's going to be an event H where she runs a marathon. Now, actually, we're not saying whether H happens in the future, the past, or the present. All that matters is that H is anterior to beta, that it happened before she turns 30. So now let's think about I. She has run a marathon. In that case, again, we've got this event, I, of her running a marathon that is anterior now to the present. So we're not specifying any particular event. With the present perfect, we're just relating it to this moment of now as I'm uttering it. So prior to this moment of my saying so, she ran a marathon. The emphasis here is just of it happening prior to this, but also that it has present consequences. So it has to do with more the idea she has run a marathon, so I think she is going to be perfectly capable of running another, right? So it's the present consequences that are emphasized here, not where it happened on the timeline. And in fact, I want you to notice that with the present perfect, you can't actually assign a specific time to it. You can't say she has run a marathon last Tuesday. It doesn't work, right? You can't put that adverbial indicating when it happened. Now I want to think about J, which combines both the perfect, which again refers to anteriority, and progressive, which refers to duration. So in this case, we've got J, which extends over a span of time. And now what we're saying is that span of time is 2 hours, and J is an act of running that extends over that time. So it's basically beginning anterior to the now she started running, and it's extending up to this moment. So it's both duration and anteriority to this moment. We can also do that with a rather unusual form, which is the future perfect progressive. So in that case, we can talk about some event of her running, which spans 3 hours. And presumably it probably started sometime before the now. It's going to end sometime in the future, at which case she will have been running for 3 hours when she finishes. So this particular spot here, which we'll mark with an X, is the moment when she finishes, and then that will have spanned 3 hours by the time that she gets there. So the finishing happens in the future. The rest of it probably extends from the past through the present into the future. I know this was kind of brief, but that's hopefully gives you a sense of what the differences are between the tenses, which are past, present, and future, and the aspects, which are simple, which is really the absence of aspect, and then progressive, which gets at duration, and then perfect, which gets to anteriority.